Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Our current session focuses on language contact in Pakistan. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would have some understanding of the linguistic map of Pakistan with reference to language contact. Well, my dear students, at the very outset of the session, this is important for us to understand what is language contact. Here I would draw the analogy of, language and human beings. As human beings, they live in a society. They do not live in isolation. They have different kinds of relationships with different people in their community. There are certain people with whom they meet very frequently. There are certain people with whom they are very close. There are certain people with whom they meet not that frequently, and they are, not that close to them. They are distant to them. There are certain people with whom they would meet, rarely. There are certain people with whom they would have certain similarities. There are certain people with whom they have less similarities, and there are certain people with whom they may have certain conflicts. So this is, how human beings live in a society, and this is how a person in a society establishes different kinds of contacts within the community network. Now, drawing the same analogy, based on using the term language, if we look at what is language contact, I would say that languages also live in the same way. Languages do not live in isolation because languages are not performed in, I would say, vacuum. They are performed in the community. They are performed in the society. Their functionality is determined by the society. So, languages relate to other languages. They come across other languages in the community, sometimes frequently, sometimes less frequently, sometimes rarely with certain languages. There are similarities, certain social or linguistic similarities, similarities in terms of phonology, semantics, or syntax, in amongst various languages or between any two languages. Sometimes there are, differences between two languages on all these levels or on any of these levels. And sometimes even there are conflicts, between two languages or amongst more than two languages, based on the social, political, and ideological factors. So, language contact, thus, in the layman's terms, is the idea where, a language comes in contact with other languages, with another language or with other languages, and thus it influences other languages and in turn gets influenced by other languages. Now the question arises, why does language contact occur? To answer this question, I would simply say, as I have already mentioned, that languages do not exist in vacuum. They are performed in the social context. So it is inevitable that different people with different linguistic repertoire, which means different funds of languages, each person would have, a multiple number of languages if that person is not a monolingual. So, different people contribute in social interactions, which brings different languages in contact. Thus, the language contact occurs in the socio-cultural setting through the interaction of the users of different languages. What does it imply? The most significant thing that language contact would imply is that any linguistic scenario or any linguistic situation would not remain the same. No language would remain the same because the situation, the sociolinguistic situation of the speakers of no language would remain the same. So, there is an idea of fluidity, there is an idea of flexibility that is attached to, language, and that is also attached to this process of language contact, which again varies and takes different shapes and forms at different times. Now, I hope with this whole understanding of the backdrop of what is language contact and how does it occur when we bring this idea to Pakistan and we try to apply it to the multilingual and, multicultural context of Pakistan, there are certain issues that come to our mind in relation to this, because in the Pakistani multiple social and linguistic context, there are multiple identities that operate at a time. And to perform these identities, different languages are used. For example, as official language, English and Urdu are used. Urdu is used as a national language, to represent the national sentiments. Then there are regional languages that show the provincial identities, that also show, the local and the ethnic identities of people. If we try to think of what is the language or what are the languages that an average Pakistani uses, we need to consider the language or the languages being used at school, that are the languages of, teaching, learning processes in a school. We also need to think of the language in the market or for the business purposes, language on the street, language at home and with friends. So, in different domains of life, people use different languages. For example, for official purposes and for very formal, highly educated purposes, people use English language to show solidarity with the nation, and for, certain official purposes where, this national identity is important, Urdu is used. Whereas in the market or on the street and at homes, there are multiple varieties of languages that are used in Pakistan, such as the provincial languages that are used as mother tongue, Punjabi, Sindhi, Balochi, Pashto, etc. So overall, multilingualism is a norm in Pakistan. It is a social norm, and the language and identity issues surround, this linguistic situation. In all this, language contact takes place in the social network. Languages come in interaction with each other. They influence each other. If we look at today's world, in fact, through the processes of push and pull, and the forces of push and pull, we can see how various, language contact, situations are, operating. For example, the impact of this language contact is taking place in Pakistan in terms of code switching, where people who are speaking in a local language or in a national in the national language, they would switch, for instance, to English to show a higher, social status or prestige, or they would use it for, certain official purposes. The switch would be made. In the same way, the processes of code mixing are taking place in the society, where, through the process of language contact, English language has influenced Urdu and the local languages a lot, and a lot of vocabulary items, the lexical items from English, have been borrowed into Urdu and in the local languages, and in a way they have become a part of that. Language shift is also taking place, and language, desertion is taking place. Punjabi, for example, is being left. Provisional languages are in the process of shift, towards national language. I would like you to think about, whosoever you are and wheresoever you live, to think about your own language and your own linguistic repertoire, the number of languages that you speak, and in your social and linguistic contact, how different aspects of multilinguality, in the midst of all this multilingualism that you find in your surroundings, how these aspects operate in your context. I think this is a good food for thought for you.